so this week we've been talking a lot about the release, and we're going to continue that theme very much in today's video. But what I'm going to do in this video is going to talk a lot about the difference between, say, like a pitch shot and just like a driver swing. Okay, so a pitch shot for me in terms of this demonstration would be anything above 30 yards. Okay, anything with inside 30 yards is more of a chip. It's just a very mini type of swing. We're talking sort of 30-40 yards and above where you're starting to produce a bigger arm swing. Now, what we talked about in the last video is we talked about this sort of effortless speed feeling, and that's why I want to start with the driver. So what I sort of suggested was use my driver. First thing we've got to do with driver is hit more up on the golf ball, so we move the ball further forward. But what's also important is as we start this downswing position is that we sequence the downswing correctly. And if we sequence the downswing correctly, so we lead with the lower body and the pelvis shifts itself progressively towards the lead side and then the chest follows suit, then what you can see is this will give me the ability to rotate around a tilted angle. Okay, so I'm not moving this way with a vertical spine, I'm rotating around a tilt. Now, what the tilt does, if you look at my hands, is it encourages the first part of the swing to be wide with the hands. Okay, so that means if I'm moving correctly, the hands come down too narrow, you're going to get stuck. So that would be the first part of the swing. And what I talked about in the last video was continuing then to rotate your chest and pelvis towards the target, because that encourages the hands to come more inward. Now, with the driver, you've got the ball further forward. You know, obviously some pros and some golfers might really try and get more of a feeling of getting that lead shoulder back to really whip that club through a little bit more. But the difference really when it comes to pitching is that obviously we don't need that level of rotation, okay? So when we get set up towards a pitch shot, what we don't need is we don't need to be whipping this club through. And in fact, if you did whip the club through, it'd be problematic more so than helpful when it comes to a pitch shot, because you're not looking for sneaky distance. You know, you don't really need the ability to kind of have a short swing and then have the capacity to do a short swing like that and hit it 75, 80 yards. There's no real benefit to that. So what you're trying to do with your pitch shot is you're almost trying to do the opposite. You're almost trying to get more of a feeling that your hands are working much sort of wider. You don't ever want to get the feeling that the hands are working on a very sort of tight curve coming into the downswing, similar to the driver. So again, just to paint that picture, you really want with the driver, you really need with the driver, by the way, to get these hands. So you start the downswing, and then as you kind of start to come into this position, like a bit of a pump drill, you really want these hands coming in on this type of tight curve from here to here, because that's going to help that club whip through and give you enough energy to get the most out of this club. But you don't need that with this. So how do you get rid of that? Well, one, you would just get rid of the consciousness of needing to rotate, and you'd put more of your emphasis in terms of what your hands and arms are doing. But also what you can do quite nicely for your pitch shots is you can change that setup position. So if I now got set up, what we need to do is we want to just get the feeling that we're keeping our spine angle very vertical. Because like I said, if we've got a tilt, the tilt will promote a little bit more of a sort of tight curve of those hands and whipping the club through. If I kind of get more vertical, this will promote the hands to work naturally much, much wider. Okay, so therefore, what you can do in the setup position, and this works every time with everybody I get a chance to work with, is I just say, well, look, if I'm going to hit this shot, it doesn't matter, 50 yards, if I take a full setup position, okay, with a 56 degree, first thing we're going to do, we're going to narrow the stance, because there's no need to be that wide, because we're not trying to promote rotation. So we narrow the stance up. Ball position, it might change a little bit. You might prefer to keep it slightly further forward. I'm not too concerned about that, but what we are concerned about is reducing any tilts. So that's why I'd probably get a lot of golfers to get the feeling that the pelvis is pointing more down and left. So I'm still keeping the flex, so that kind of helps me shift the pressure in towards that left leg. But see, now it changes my shoulders. So my shoulders become much more horizontal. And by the shoulders becoming more horizontal, my spine becomes more vertical. And as my spine becomes more vertical, this is going to encourage my hands to work on a wider angle. If I was too tilted, then my hands come in, and that gives us that unnecessary whip through the golf ball. Okay? And that would be it really. You would experiment with this feeling, belt buckle down towards lead ankle. That would be very different. You'd change your perspective quite considerably for a lot of you. But from there, then it's just a nice wide hand path. And what you'll start to do, which is the key thing for pitching, is if you can start to control that hands working through consistently in a sort of clock face fashion, then you're going to get consistency in distance. And to be honest with you, when it comes to pitching, that's all it's about. It's just about recognizing those distances and just making sure you don't catch that sort of, you know, that sort of one that just shoots off, you know, 20 yards further than you expected, because you're not too sure how to stop that from happening. And also, you might find that even though this doesn't affect your pitching, it might be, again, another little added suit for why you struggle for distance. Because if you're somebody who goes this way, your hands are going to work wide, no distance. But it's good technique for pitching, and you'll probably associate with that as well. So, pelvis down and left. That gets the spine more vertical, shoulders more horizontal. And the big reason for that really is because it's not so much because it affects contact, but what it does do is it paints a much wider hand arc, which takes away any unnecessary speed. See you guys again really soon.